Welcome to Question and Answer with William DeMille, where we talk about gardening, homesteading, growing your own food, the Georgic tradition, silvopasture, permaculture, biodynamics, and so much more. We have super exciting news this week. I have a sponsor. It is Survival Garden Seeds. I met a guy and he owns his business. He was at a seminar last year that I was teaching. I taught a week-long seminar at Monticello College in southern Utah, and it was a super fun event. Well, he came to it. We got to know each other, and we've developed a friendship. And then we've been talking for a while, and then this last week we got to talking, and he said, "Why don't I be your sponsor and just get seeds for you and help you with your school?" And then you can, when you do anything, you can just say that we're your sponsor, and then it's a win-win for both of us. So it's great. I got seeds from him last summer, and I planted them. I have lots of things growing that came from his seeds in the greenhouse right now. So we have lettuce and beets and Napa cabbage, and there's other things growing out there that came from Survival Garden Seeds. So that's pretty awesome. I've been thinking it'd be fun to work with other people like this, and it came to pass this week. So that is pretty great. I'm super excited about it. The 9 ways that I help people grow food is with my YouTube channel, my weekly Zoom meeting that is a question and answer where you ask your questions and I answer them. I have a Patreon page. I have a soil laboratory. I teach a Georgic schoolroom, all kinds of classes. I have a 3-day boot camp. I'm available for consulting. My book is ready to order on Amazon, so go there and get it and sign up for my newsletter. My summer class will be coming up, and we're going to prepare for that on these Thursday night classes by reading books to give us context. So we're going to be reading The Winter Room, One Straw Revolution, As a Man Thinketh, Green Grass in the Spring, A Message to Garcia, Searching for Home, Finding Grace, The Strangest Secret, 12 Rules for Life, Holistic Management, Dirt to Soil, Worry-Free Eating, and The Lessons of History. So this is going to be super fun. So there's things in these books I disagree with. There's things in these books that I absolutely love. So we can listen to some of these authors who have had really good influence in their sphere, some of them around the world, and we can see and understand some of the cool things that we'll be talking about in our class this summer in the Georgic schoolroom. Boot camp is coming up on January 11th, 12th, and 13th. So that's just weeks away. So that's going to be a super fantastic event for 3 days. People come to my greenhouse, and in the wintertime, we go in there, we make compost, we work with the soil, we harvest crops, and we taste things, we eat stuff. So it's really a fun class. Everybody who's come to boot camp has said they've really enjoyed it. So that's pretty awesome to have 100% feedback from this event that I've been doing. Summer class starts May 20th. So we will be doing the book discussions this winter, but if you want to sign up and come to the class, it's going to be May 20th, and then it goes through September 14th. So it's on site here at the ranch in northern Nevada where I live. And you can come here and you can learn all about soil health, regenerative agriculture, permaculture, biodynamics, holistic management, silvopasture, Georgics, eco-agriculture. And by the time you're done, you will be able to have a really good handle on ecological literacy. Ecological literacy is one of those things that we just don't have in this world. We simply are not literate when it comes to the ecology around us. And that's why there's so much confusion in the environmental movement and in the political conversation going on about the environment, because people don't understand it. So people say, well, do you believe in the environmental movement? Man, you have to have a 2-hour conversation to understand that. If you're coming at it from a political point of view, and 99% of people come at it from that point of view, then we can't even have a conversation until we talk for a couple of hours so that we can see where we are on the same page. That's how bad the ecological literacy is in the world we're in. And of course, profitability in farming is very important. Now, the suicide rate among farmers has been extremely high for decades because farmers cannot be profitable, and then they love their land, their farm so much that they identify with that instead of themselves as a person. So there's issues and problems with this. So these are the kinds of things that we talk about so that people can go away from the Georgic schoolroom with a healthier view of who they are in the world and what they were born for. So tonight's education is about what to plant in December. So if you're planting outside in most of North America, you don't plant anything. Now, if you're in the deep south, there's stuff you can plant. But most gardeners that I deal with are in the states that have a serious winter. The ground freezes, they get snowfall. So for most of my audience, we don't really plant anything in December, but we can argue about that later during the Q&A if you want to get into the details. But in the greenhouse this month, in fact, this week, probably maybe even tomorrow, I'm going to be planting green onions, kale, collards, broccoli, cabbage, carrots, lettuce, spinach, pea shoots, and a lot of other leafy greens. So that could include all your oriental greens. There's all kinds of interesting things like bok choy and napa and mi queen choy and joy choy. There's all these fun things that you can grow in the wintertime. So those are good things to plant now. Just remember, if you're planting in a greenhouse in December, things grow about 10 times slower than they do in the summertime. So once they start growing, you need to expect food in March. From a December planting, you have food in March. You don't get it in December and January or February. So it takes a long time. So some people throw up their hands and say, well, it's not even worth it. Actually, it is worth it if you have a greenhouse, because what we do is we don't just plant in December, we plant every single month. So we have 12 plantings a year. And so you always have a continual flow of food. So right now my greenhouse is filled with a lot of food that I planted in September. And what I planted in October is starting to be eaten, depending on what it is. What I planted in November is still growing, and we probably won't harvest that for a while yet. Okay, so what do we eat in December in the wintertime? So in storage right now, I have onions, potatoes, and garlic that are in the root cellar. And my cabbages, I've just eaten the last one. So what does that tell me? I didn't grow enough of them. But cabbages can be stored for a long time in a root cellar. I still have apples. I ran out of rutabagas. I need to plant more of those. I love rutabagas. Rutabagas are like a turnip, and most people I talk to don't know the difference between a rutabaga and turnip. Let's be clear, a rutabaga is good enough to eat. A turnip, you just feed that to your livestock. So if you've eaten turnips before, they're not that good. Now, there are some varieties of turnips. You pick them when they're the size of a small radish, like there's an inch across. Those can be pretty good. But once your your turnips get really big out in the field and you're storing them in the root cellar, they're basically just a fantastic food for your sheep and your goats and your cattle during the winter time. And of course, grains. Grains are a fantastic thing to do. If you have a big enough garden to grow grains, you should have those in storage. That's what we should be eating in December. There's other things, but those are the main ones. So the things that are fresh that should freeze before you eat them, because it improves their quality so much that they should always freeze, would be kale, collards, carrots, Brussels sprouts. If you eat Brussels sprouts that have not frozen naturally outside, they're not hardly edible. You always want them to freeze before you pick them. Kale is the same way. There's a lot of people saying, I would rather be fat than eat kale. You know, I can agree with that sentiment, because if you are eating kale from the grocery store, 99% chance it came from California, and in the California fields, it never freezes. They never have a winter. They do have a winter, but it doesn't freeze the crops because it's warm there in those massive fields where they're growing stuff. And so you're not getting the good, high quality kale. Here again, another example of people being cheated when they eat from the grocery store. What option does the masses have? They don't, except grow your own garden. So start growing gardens. It's fantastic. So those are the things that need to be frozen before you eat them. Kale, collards, carrots, Brussels sprouts. I don't even like carrots anymore unless they have frozen. So the summer carrots, I'm always disappointed. Yeah, and that's just because I'm spoiled because I can grow some pretty good food. What are we eating fresh right now? We're eating lettuce, spinach, claytonia, green onions, bok choy, Napa cabbage. And I know there's more in my greenhouse than that, but I sat down and wrote this out and I couldn't think of anything else. But there's more than that growing out there, but these are the things we're eating right now from the garden. So what is the food for the livestock that you're feeding your livestock in the winter time? So you can feed livestock turnips, rutabagas, beets, tree hay, comfrey, alfalfa, grass, fresh weeds from the greenhouse, kitchen scraps, and then I was going to write more on that, but I couldn't think of anything else. But the big ones are the root crops. You can be producing a lot of eggs, dairy, and meat at this time of year by feeding your livestock many of these things. If they have an appetite for it and they will eat it, they will make you a lot of food. So if you have dairy sheep or dairy goats or dairy cattle, those are the only common dairy animals in the United States. If you're somewhere else, maybe you are milking camels or yaks or whatever. But they will give you a lot of food. So if you don't like turnips, feed the turnips to the sheep, and then you drink the sheep milk. By the way, sheep milk has the best flavor ever. And then cow's milk is pretty good flavor. And goat's milk can be a good flavor. You have to take really good care of it, or it'll get an off flavor really quick. So I prefer sheep milk, although I don't have sheep that we're milking right now, but I'm going to change that. That's something I would really like to do. Remember that a diverse diet is the healthiest diet that there is. The more diversity you have, the healthier your diet is. This is what all the people smarter than me are telling me about the foods. Common people in the outback, I don't know what they call it in India. They don't call it the outback. That's what they call it in Australia. But just out in the countryside, in the farm country, where people have the beautiful opportunity to grow their own food and to trade with neighbors, they are eating dozens and dozens of different types of, grains and pulses and legumes. Just they have a very diverse diet. And in that population of people who have that diet, they're a pretty healthy community. No, I don't know about the cities. I'm not that well versed. All I know is what I read. So we are at the mercy of the authors that I've been reading. But it's an interesting idea, and I tend to believe it. Americans tend to not eat very much diversity. Pretty much the only grain that Americans eat, and unfortunately it's highly processed, would be wheat. And then the second one would be oats. There is quite a bit of oat consumption, but it doesn't, but it's certainly a second to wheat. And, we need to be adding in a lot of other grains into our diets to get those benefits. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Let's just open this up for questions and answers. And this Q&A is brought to you by survivalgardenseeds.com. Go to their website, look at their selection. They do something fascinating and beautiful. On every single one of their seed packets, on the back of it, they tell you how to save seeds from those plants that you are planting. And it is the only seed company I've ever seen that does that, which is pretty neat. This company, they do not sell hybrids. All of their seed selections are common, open pollinated, and a lot of them are heirlooms, but they're beautiful, wonderful seeds. And I've been growing these seeds, and I can honestly tell you that they have done very well for me. So I'm going to stop my screen share here and let's open this up to Q&A. If there's any questions tonight, go ahead and unmute and give me a question, and then we will wrap this up.
I have a question. So I am curious about the principles behind generating land races of your own stuff. That's something I've been I've been trying to do here in Enoch, Utah, where I'm at. I've been growing, the only one I've done this successfully with is I now have a strain of kale that refuses to die in the winter because I only harvested seed from the kale that survived through the winter. And the first year I had 1 plant, the second year I had 6 plants, and this year I have a very large patch of kale that's still going strong past we're getting into frosts every night and it just doesn't care.
Nice.
And so I think I've been doing good with that, but I've been unsuccessful with radishes and with a few other things that I've been trying to do kind of similar things with. And I'm wondering if you have any advice to help me kind of up my game with that.
I mean, okay, so 2 things about this. First of all, let me explain a landrace for people who may be watching this recording. A landrace is a plant that adapts to your local conditions, to your soil, the habits of the farmer, just everything in the ecology of where that plant is growing. So you had 1 plant that grew, you saved the seed from it. The next year you had more. This year you have so many you can't count them. So that is good, and you do see results in plants in 3 to 5 years often. If you're dealing with fruits, it's something like 8 years usually before it stabilizes into what we would call like a variety where you can count on the same characteristics every year and you're not getting a bunch of weird ones. So I just wanted to say that. But the other thing is, I don't know if I can help you up your game unless you're talking about like maybe one specific variety. We could talk about each one because they're going to be, and by variety I mean species. We're going to be it would be different like specifics for each species a little bit. But if you have Joseph Lofthouse's book about landrace gardening, he has charts in there that tell you kind of what to do with each ones. It's very simple, very easy. You don't have to have a PhD to read this book. Anybody can read this book and get it. He wrote it to the common gardener, which is awesome. And he could have written it to like, you had to have 6 PhDs to understand it because he's very well educated. He has that background, but I really appreciate that he wrote it so that anybody can read it and understand it and garden and use his information as valuable information. But you know, of all the gardeners alive today, you are among the 3% that's in leadership of land racing, even though you think you're not because you've only done it with kale. Well, most people haven't even heard of the word land race, and those who haven't tried it, and those who have tried it are probably having success, and they're like you because they're like, oh yeah, I'll try that, but nobody's really doing it. And so since you've actually done it, you can start teaching other people. And so what I'm saying is good job, congratulations. After that, me saying that, is there anything else that you'd like to ask to follow up?
Yes, and it is a follow-up. Where do we draw the line in this community between a landrace variety and an heirloom variety? Where do we draw that line? Because as I understand it, the concept is very similar.
Yeah. So here's how I think about it. A landrace is creating a brand new heirloom variety. Okay. Now, I've had people really twitch their eye when I said that, and they didn't like it. But think about it. Okay, before I start preaching, a landrace is when you would take either one variety and you grow it in your area long enough that it adapts to your area, or you take dozens or even hundreds of varieties from one species. You grow that in your area and you select for the genes that you want. And as they cross pollinate with each other, they'll create a whole bunch of different hybrids. And then anywhere from 3 to 8, 10 years later, depending on how long it takes, they will stabilize into a new variety so that when you plant that seed, it's going to be this predictable offspring. So an heirloom is a plant that was developed a long time ago, a long ways away from you, not in your soil, not in your climate, not in your community. And yet we talk about heirlooms as if they are the very best ever. And they probably were where they were, but they need to adapt to your area. And so as you save your own seeds every year, they are adapting generation after generation after generation to your growing conditions. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And so basically what I'm hearing is that an heirloom is just a really old land race from a place that it got famous from, and maybe lots and lots of people used it and it spread all over the region. Like if I get some kind of fancy oregano seed from Tuscany that's been growing there for 1,000 years, and then I bring it here, and now I'm not in Tuscany, and so it has to now adapt, right? And that's
Yes.
what I'm hearing.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. I think that answers my question.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So what are the benefits of land racing? Well, because you can create the flavors that you want and love as a human, you know? I mean, the reason we love heirlooms is because they were really special for some reason. Well, let's just create the ones that do the best in our climate that are really special to us. And it doesn't take that long. I mean, think about it. A young person who gets a home and they're working their career and they really love gardening. Well, I know people move around a lot nowadays, but let's say you're in a house for 20 years. It only takes you the first 5 years to create an entire garden of the most awesome vegetables ever. And now you have these beautiful, awesome foods that you can't buy because they don't exist anywhere else. I mean, that's the coolest thing ever. And we can do it. But everybody's scared and they think, oh boy, you got to be careful. You got to this, you got to that. I don't even know what they're talking about. It doesn't make sense to me. Let's be making land races of every variety out there, meaning every species out there, everything you like to eat. Let's adapt them to our areas so that we have the most fantastic foods ever. Okay, that was a fun discussion. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. This recording was going on YouTube. Same time, same place next week. Check us out to learn more at www.georgicrevolution.com.